Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. This is the monthly T5 webinar that's produced by the Texas PACE Authority, the third Thursday at 2 training series. Today, we're going to be covering PACE for industrial projects and looking at how PACE can serve as a financing option for industrial energy, water, and environmental projects. Advance the slide here. There we go. So if you're an attendee today, two things that will happen. First, you will earn a 1-hour professional development hour. We can provide a certificate if that's helpful to you in Texas for engineers and so forth. I know oftentimes that's not required, but we're happy to do that. So if you're interested in receiving that certificate of attendance, just send me an email. My email is there, dubtaylor@texaspaceauthority.org. And then also, we have Texas PACE Authority has just revised its service provider listing. And if you are interested after this training in becoming listed there as either a contractor, a capital provider, a independent third-party reviewer, or other related services, again, just shoot me an email and I can get you some information to complete and we can get you listed on the website. So two takeaways from today. The presenters today, myself, Dub Taylor. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Texas PACE Authority. Joined TPA a little over a year ago after serving with the state of Texas for a number of years, most recently as the head of the State Energy Conservation Office. Prior to that, I had experience in the commercial real estate sector. And I'm fortunate to be joined today by Dr. Teresa Snyder with EB Management Group. She is later in the presentation going to be talking about some specific case studies where PACE has been used to implement industrial projects. EB has considerable experience in that area, and so we'll have some actual case studies to see how PACE gets applied to those projects and to serve these industrial needs. So our agenda for today are these items. Won't read through them, but we'll go through them one by one as we hit the different sections of the presentation. So first of all, we're going to start, and this is going to be a review for some I know who are on. So bear with us, or maybe it'll fill in some blanks or reinforce some understanding. We're going to talk about what is PACE and where is it. So PACE stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy Financing. The acronym is PACE, and the F is not part of the acronym, but that's really what this is all about. And it's a unique financing structure that uses assessments to secure long-term loans for projects that have long-term benefits. There's oftentimes a disconnect between the benefits of an energy or water project or a clean energy project and its financing. So PACE was designed to fit that need and provide that long-term financing. 100% financing can be provided, and this is for energy efficiency, water conservation, distributed generation projects. And in Texas, the property types that are eligible are commercial, also nonprofit, but then today we're going to be talking about industrial and manufacturing, and then also in Texas, multifamily units on the commercial side are eligible as well. So what makes this unique, again, is that the financing is paid via a special property assessment that is there in place over the useful life of the improvements. And to make all this happen, the state legislature in Texas passed a law in 2013 to enable it. Local governments then have adopted this, and this is not a regulatory program or anything that is required. It is a tool in the toolkit, so it's voluntary and it's open market, meaning that there's not a prescribed list of contractors or capital providers that have to be used. It's whichever makes most sense for the project and for the owner. So we have a voluntary and open market system in Texas. And so, why is PACE a useful tool? If you look at a conventional financing scenario for equipment replacements, this graph on the bottom left, typically your maximum repayment term for an equipment financing project may be somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years at most. And the savings or the benefits from that project, if it's an energy efficient HVAC system, pump, motor, compressed air, you name it, may accrue over a much longer period of time. So your repayment is higher than your savings over that repayment term, meaning that from a cash flow perspective, you're upside down financially. The model on the right illustrates how PACE changes that scenario, and the repayment is stretched over a much longer term so that it equals the savings are equal to or greater than the debt service. So you become cash flow positive day one. So the long-term secured nature of the PACE structured loan is really what sets it apart. And if you compare PACE to to other financing alternatives, the three scenarios here, the yellow line on the graph that goes down illustrates if you were to use your own capital. This A assumes you have your own capital, and B, if you do, you don't have a higher use for it, which is probably not likely. So there you go negative initially because you make the investment. This illustration is a energy efficiency upgrade, $1.1 million, estimated savings, $125,000 per year. So you go negative, but then once you have made that investment, you begin to realize benefits right away, and it's a pretty straight line up to where there's the payback at year 8. If you look at the middle option, the conventional loan option, typically there's going to be a down payment required, probably 20%. So again, that dips into your available capital, and then you begin to realize the benefits and you become cash flow positive about year 9. With PACE, it is a more gradual incline of that curve, but also, as you can see, you never dip below the line. So you're always cash flow positive. We have on our website this calculator. The website is there below, excuse me, and you can plug in your own numbers and run these scenarios based on your project needs and the type of financing you're looking for and do the comparison. So I'd encourage you to do that. So where is PACE? Across the country, 36 different states plus the District of Columbia have passed programs to enable PACE, and 24 of those have active programs. So some have passed authorizing legislation, but they don't have active programs yet. In Texas, our process is that since the law exists, that allows local governments to determine to create a PACE region, generally the city boundaries, the county line, that's the district, and then any project that is eligible within those boundaries could utilize that PACE program. So it's a county by county or a city by city process. And there's with the screen here, the local adoption process. You can see there's a few steps involved, 2 actions that are taken by the governing body, by the elected officials. A resolution of intent is passed, a resolution to establish, and then the local governments that have established PACE programs have determined that they did not want to create a new PACE department or a new cost or burden for the local government. And so they have outsourced administration and oversight to third-party administrators. And that's where we come in. That's what we do. So the Texas PACE Authority is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit, and we were created exclusively to backstop local governments and run the PACE programs for them. So the local governments are our clients. We report to them. We work with property owners to help walk through the process and help them better understand how PACE may be applicable to their facilities and their needs. We work with the capital providers that provide the funding to, again, make sure that the projects align with all the requirements. And then we work with service providers as they are moving through the project to answer any questions they have. So our role, we don't provide, our group does not provide the financing. We don't do the actual contracting or work. And obviously we don't own the properties. So we're really the facilitator working for the local governments that helps all of these deals happen. And in Texas, we now have 57 local government cities and counties across the state that have adopted PACE and have active programs. This covers about 60% of the population. So obviously we're a big state, and this is sort of a patchwork if you look at it. But if you look at where the blue shaded areas are in the stars for the cities, those are high centers of population. So much of the state is covered. And we do have, I would say, I think this year alone, we've had 2 or 3 new local governments establish programs, and more are considering that as well. So this, I would expect the map to continue to color in. So how's PACE worked to date? by the numbers, about $152 million of investment in Texas. You can see we started off in 2015 when things just kicked off, and a pretty steady growth curve. 2016, 2018, 2019, from a dollar volume perspective, was actually the highest of any of the prior years. In fact, I believe it was higher than the prior years combined. 2020 was obviously a COVID year that had an impact on business and projects of all types, but we still had a very healthy year. Not as high a dollar volume, but actually more individual transactions than any prior year. And in 2021, we've kicked it off with quite a few projects already. So I think that this curve you see here is pretty indicative of what we expect to see in Texas. And the types of projects we're seeing, as you can see, energy efficiency, water efficiency, distributed generation. The majority of these have been energy efficiency projects. And the one concerning thing, and part of the reason we're here today to help educate not only industrial property owners, but service providers, is that the industrial energy load in Texas is very significant. At least half of all the energy consumed in the state is in the industrial sector. But you see a very small percentage of PACE projects in the industrial space. So there's been a disconnect, and we understand that there are some challenges that industrial property owners face in scoping projects and moving them forward through their organizations. And we hope that PACE going forward can be seen as a more useful tool in the toolbox to help with the financing of some of these projects. I'm going to stop real quick. I did see a question, and I would say I didn't mention this at the outset, but if you have questions, please submit them in the Q&A box and also in the chat, and we'll get to those either as we're going forward or we'll get to them at the end. So please do submit those. Okay, so in the commercial sector, I think some of the challenges we've seen revolve around these misconceptions. And we talked to a number of very large industrial plant owners about PACE. Have they considered it? Do they know how it operates? How can it apply to their needs and their facilities? And these are some of the things that we heard. One, because the most of the PACE projects that have been completed are in the commercial space, there's a misconception that this is just for commercial buildings. Clearly they're eligible, but it's not. It's in Texas, an industrial project, a plant, a refinery, a chemical manufacturing facility, large ag, all of these agricultural space. These are all eligible projects as well. Another thing we heard is that PACE is really just for smaller projects like HVAC and lighting. Well, it is, and certainly it's been used for that, but it's not limited. It can be used for very large projects as well. And we'll get to those in here in a bit. The other thing is we heard is that PACE could only be used just for equipment and not, what about the design, the installation, the commissioning, the engineering that goes into the project? And the answer there is that PACE financing is to be used for the installed cost of the equipment. So that involves all these soft costs as well. A new boiler, chiller, furnace, blower, motor that arrives to your loading dock doesn't help save energy and doesn't yield the benefits you're expecting. So the install cost of all of these measures is what is financeable. Then we also heard, well, this is a government program and it's government funding, and there was probably a lot of strings attached in reporting, and that doesn't match up with our needs. Even though this is a government-enabled program, the funding comes from private sources. So it's not government funding. It's private lenders, private capital providers that do provide the financing. So there is not sort of the set of government funding requirements that you would normally associate with a grant or any other government funding. Another thing we heard is there's an upper limit. In the case of a large industrial property, you might have a very large equipment replacement that need, and it may be $100 million or more. Well, PACE could finance that. There are capital providers that are on our list on our website today that have said they will, entertain projects from $1 million to $500 million. So it can be a very large project that can be financed. So there's not necessarily an upper limit. The other is we have on our website, we do have a list of contractors and capital providers. That is there informationally, and we make that clear on our list. That's not a prescriptive list. You don't have to use those contractors or capital providers. Those are different service providers that have been through some training that understand how PACE works. But if there is a contractor you're working with already, if there's a capital provider already that you have a relationship with, certainly they can be part of this. So it's an open structure. Then the other thing we heard, and this is mostly from refineries and chemical plants, was that there is a deadline, or it's an annual requirement that the projects be done, and that really doesn't sync maybe with our needs, with our turnarounds that are planned, or shutdown activities where some of these larger replacements can happen. Again, this can be on your own schedule. There's not necessarily a deadline. It needs to follow whatever makes sense for the owner and for the contractor to get executed. So it can indeed sync with shutdowns and turnarounds. Let me go back one. Okay, so next let me jump into some of the drivers that open opportunities for use of PACE, some of the challenges and reasons that projects aren't happening now otherwise, and then some of the opportunities that this helps address. First of all, just sort of looking a snapshot at the industrial sector energy consumption. The graph on the left shows industrial energy use 1950 to 2019, and as you can see, the overall number in terms of BTUs is pretty steady. The the fuel mix and delivering those BTUs has changed over the years, but it's been pretty steady. So very consistent and very significant consumption in the industrial space. And on the right, what you see is the breakout of how that is consumed, that energy is consumed by sector. The two biggest wedges, the blue one on the top right is bulk chemical manufacturing and production, and then the bottom right is refining. And that is Texas. Most of our industrial energy consumption in Texas is chemical and refining, number 1 and 2 by a long shot. So big opportunities here, and I think again, matching this as a tool for plant operators and contractors is something that that opportunity still remains. So one of the challenges we have here, and the reason that some of these efficiency projects have not been done, is we have overall pretty low and pretty stable power prices. Electricity is a big input cost. Obviously, natural gas, fuel gas, also big input costs. But overall, the industrial sector, the green bar at the bottom on the left chart, shows that the industrial sector has the lowest per unit average retail costs of electricity, prices for electricity of any sector, and that's remained pretty flat. If you look at Texas specifically, and this is a snapshot I took a few days ago, May 17th, about 6 p.m. And the scale, what you can see there is these are spot prices throughout the ERCOT market within Texas. And overall, power prices at that time were in the 2 cents a kilowatt hour. These are wholesale prices, don't include delivery charges, but 2 cents. And then where you see the kind of the green and the yellow toward the bottom part of the state in the valley, those are actually negative prices. A lot of that is wind related, where you have wind production coming onto the grid in the afternoon. You get coastal breezes that come off the Gulf. Wind production ramps up, and so prices can even be negative. And if you're trying to cost justify or cash flow an efficiency project, and your prices are this low or even negative, that certainly is a barrier. An opportunity that PACE can also help achieve here is that ESG, which is more on the radar for more companies of all types these days, and that's environmental, social, governance related risk. If you look at how, and this is a chart that S&P has put together in their industry report card, industry sector report card, chemicals and refining and marketing are near the top. And so if you have commitments, ESG commitments, and ESG goals, then efficiency projects, energy and water conservation projects, which may benefit profitability and bottom line and reduce input costs, also spin off ESG benefits that can be quantified maybe on a separate set of the corporate balance sheet. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So the PACE program, our model here, I mentioned it briefly, but back in 2013, the Texas legislature passed a bill enabling PACE. After that, there was a effort to put together a uniform set of guidelines and how this could operate throughout the state. That's referred to as PACE in a box, a toolkit that can be used by cities and counties so that there's consistency from location to location. And then the next level of detail is our organization put together a set of guidelines, and this is more of an operations manual on how to use PACE. So some of the things to keep in mind under state law, what is eligible, and this is a pretty broad definition of what's a qualified improvement. The key things I've underlined here, and that is that it has to be a permanent improvement, and in our definition here, permanent means that it needs to be in place as long as the financing. So it doesn't mean forever, it doesn't mean 100 years necessarily, but if the loan or the financing is 20 years, then it should have a 20-year useful life. So permanent improvement, fixed to real property. That means something that is bolted into place, it is plumbed, you got electricians involved, something that is not transportable or movable easily. So that meets the fixed definition. And then it has to be something that's intended to decrease energy or water consumption or demand. In some cases, there may be a project that reduces unit consumption or demand or both, but it can be either. And then the last thing is a technology that is on the customer side of the meter that can generate electricity, provide thermal energy, or regulate temperature. So distributed generation systems, CHP, rooftop solar, anything on the customer side of the meter that generates power or thermal energy could also be eligible. And then again, under the very last one, under real property, this is for privately owned buildings and properties and plants only, not for public, privately owned commercial or industrial, and then also larger residential apartments. But the key here is that this is all for privately owned. It's a tool for privately owned properties. And here's just an example. This is not a all-telling extensive list, but just some of the things that we typically see in PACE projects, and these are this is a list a little more tailored to industrial, but chillers and boilers and furnaces, certainly all of those sorts of large equipment replacements can be financed and supported through PACE. Combustion related efficiency improvements and upgrades, compressed air systems, steam traps, lighting. You may have building envelope in a plant facility. There may be mechanical insulation that needs to either be installed or replaced. Fuel switching, there can be a savings there, and then also the renewable and the distributed generation systems. On the water side, some examples: water conservation systems, reuse, condensate capture, reclamated water use, high efficiency equipment, sort of anything like that. So these are just, again, examples of things that we typically would see in a PACE project. And then I also mentioned earlier that the idea is for this to be 100% financing for the project. So there are soft costs that are part of all these projects. There's going to be materials in some cases. There's going to be labor involved to do the installation. If those materials and labor are related to the main equipment that's financed, then those costs can be rolled in. Any sort of a change that's required, if you're having to move large equipment and say extend a pad or build a new pad, that could be something that could be rolled in. Design and commissioning costs, engineering costs, permitting and inspection fees, all those sorts of things on the project side. And then this is it's a real estate financial transaction. So there are different reviews that are required, legal, et cetera, lender fees, program application fees, et cetera. So all of those costs, the soft costs, can be rolled in as well. Some owners may not want to do this. They may want to pay for some of these costs separately because that may create more headroom in the project for more project, but they can be financed. So all of this is outlined in 2 key sections of the PACE in a Box Toolkit. This is all available on our website. One deals with the underwriting standards, and these are really kind of the more financial components of the overall program. And then the technical standards, which speak to how a baseline is created, how you're measuring improvement from a baseline, what that delta is, and then how that becomes the basis for the loan. All of these are on the website here. We're going to walk through a couple of things. The technical standards document is being updated right now. A new version should be out in, I'm guessing, the next probably 30 days. But it lays out, again, in detail, how to go through establishing baseline and measuring impact from that baseline. These are not new standards, something that were created specifically for PACE. It sort of ties together a lot of existing standards that you're probably familiar with already if you're in this field. And then the independent third-party reviewer qualifications, that's at the bottom. This would be an engineer that is hired by the owner that reviews the project, again, to ensure that it meets all the standards. That's really kind of the quality control element. And in Texas, we require that be a Texas licensed PE with experience, related experience in these areas. So those are the 2 things that are laid out there. The technical standards update is also going to include a calculator, that's what we're calling it, where you can put in different project details, costs, savings, and it will assist in determining whether the project is going to comply and meet all the standards for PACE. So that's coming as well. We think that's going to be very helpful. So on the financial side, the underwriting criteria, a couple of things to keep in mind here. There is a limit. So the assessment or the loan relative to the value of the overall property cannot exceed 25%. So if it's a $1 million property, then 250 is your cap on the PACE loan. So that's just to make sure you're not overburdening the property, and there's plenty of headroom. On the savings to investment ratio, this is a calculation I'll talk about here in just a second. But there we're looking to make sure that the savings or benefits in the project are at least equal to the cost, so that protects the owner. And then if there happens to be a mortgage on the property, which in an industrial property may not be the case very often, there is consent that needs to be provided by the mortgage holder, because the assessment that supports the PACE loan becomes senior to any mortgage that's there. And so the mortgage holder will want to know that, and under state law, they have to provide consent. So in the savings to investment ratio, pretty simple calculation. I mentioned earlier that we look for 1 or greater to qualify. And the way that this is done is you're looking at the estimated projected savings. So that's the total energy or water savings over the life of the assessment. And then you find the total investment cost. This is the amount that is financed. Again, this can include the equipment as well as project-related installation and soft costs. I put here that utility incentives and tax credits. It's very important because a lot of these projects inherently qualify for these incentives, and they should be pursued because that's sort of cash, like owner's cash contribution to the project, and it can buy down the cost, the investment, such that it may clear this SIR requirement more easily. So in the example here, pumps, motors, and controls, $1 million project, including the financing cost. That's qualified for incentives of $50,000. So net project cost of $950 over a 20-year period. That's the savings, and the calculation equals a 1. So that's what we're looking for. So these numbers on the savings side, you can add or delete different components to achieve greater savings depending on those projections. And on the investment side, You can work with those numbers as well, factoring in any incentives, tax credits, cash contributions, et cetera. So this is the key qualifier here, the SIR. This is laid out in our program guide documents. You can look at this online, open them up bit by bit. We'll be updating these once the other technical guidelines are updated as well. So look for those updates. These won't be dramatic changes, more updates as we've had more practice with more projects to hopefully streamline the process, make it easier to access for owners. So next, let's walk through how a project looks in the different roles. So on the project side, it's really these 4 steps. And the 2 columns here, the contractor column and the ITPR column, it's important to understand the difference there. So the contractor, this is an entity that the owner selects. Again, it can be any contractor. It can be internal personnel if that's an option to do the work, where just maybe equipment is financed, and then the labor cost is absorbed by the owner. But the contractor does an energy or water analysis. We have a template, some key things to look at there. Again, you're conducting a baseline calculation. You're looking at the improvements off of that baseline. That's done by the contractor. That does not have to be a professional engineer. Can be, but doesn't have to be. And then it moves over next to the ITPR. So the energy and water analysis, again, can be done by the contractor engineer. There are some standards that we have that sort of lay out how that's done, and the cost can be rolled into the project. The savings review, this is the first step. The independent third-party reviewer reviews that. This is really a desk review to understand how the project is taking shape. They likely also will do a site visit, record photos, things like this, to sort of get an accurate assessment of the pre-project conditions. Then you move into the project construction phase, done by the contractor. And then the installation verification is this next part. So the ITPR does their before review, getting an accurate assessment of the baseline conditions. And then again, under state law, a verification that the project has been installed and is operating as intended, with site visit photos if necessary to document that. So those 2 steps, sort of the pre-construction and the post-construction, ensure the project gets installed and is operating as intended, and that the benefits that the owner is looking for to offset the financing will be there. So project construction, installation verification, and that's it. So now let's look at how this actually applies in real life. Some case studies. I'm going to talk about one first, but the type of projects we've seen in Texas have been really literally all over the map, rural and urban throughout the state, office buildings, mixed use, nonprofit, a lot of different things, all different types of projects themselves: energy efficiency, water conservation, demand reduction. Oftentimes these projects can also deliver resiliency benefits to help you ride through, say, winter storms, when the electricity is off for 4 or 5 days, which we didn't think would happen in Texas. So they can have co-benefits like that as well. And then the projects that have been financed in Texas so far, smallest, I think, was a single, maybe a rooftop solar project, $68,000 on a commercial building, up to $24 million so far. But there's no set lower or upper limit. There's probably a functional lower limit where, you know, the size of the project, for it to make sense to apply for PACE and to use this process, that may be it, 68,000, 50 or so. But then on the upside, there's probably, you know, could be 100 million, 200 million, depends on what the capital provider is willing to finance. And all of these have received 100% financing. So the project in Texas I'm going to highlight is, this is just south of Dallas, Navarro County, in Corsicana. And this was a textile manufacturer, Levy company, that purchased an older manufacturing facility, and it needed everything. It needed upgrades for lighting, HVAC, and so forth. it had been used for that sort of production before, but not in a while. And this was really what was important, I think, to the community, was this was going to be a source of jobs. Not thousands, but good solid jobs in manufacturing. So they used PACE to do complete mechanical, electrical, lighting upgrade. The savings were very significant. 20-year term on the loan, $324,000 project, and it allowed, again, this company to relocate to this facility, repurpose and reuse it, and the jobs and the economic benefit delivered there to the county and to the city of Corsicana. So this is kind of a light manufacturing, and what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Teresa to talk about some of the larger industrial projects they've had experience with in other parts of the country, and hopefully we can replicate and see soon in Texas. So Teresa, take it away and give me a signal when you'd like me to advance the slide.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dub. Appreciate that. Just a brief introduction. So as Dub said, I'm Teresa Snyder. I am Vice President of Strategic Growth and Development for EB Management Group. We are based in Toledo, Ohio. However, I recently relocated to Bastrop County here in Texas with the intent to grow the Texas market and to bring our model down here to help partners like Dub and others to spread PACE across the state. We've completed more than 75 CPACE projects. We call it CPACE, just commercial PACE. It's just an internal delineation between residential and commercial. Everything from a small $25,000 lighting project to multi-million-dollar manufacturing, medical buildings, you name it, we've done it. I've been in PACE about 10 years. Formerly, I was with the Toledo-Lucas County Port Authority and headed up their energy finance, and cut my teeth in PACE doing that. So let's go to the next slide. So EB is a little bit different. I'm just going to share with you what we do and what we've discovered. Part of the challenge with PACE as an industry is that there's little knowledge about it. And so getting consumers and partners to understand, municipalities to even to understand, there's a huge education curve. So what EB has done is they've built a model where they actually act as an owner's rep on projects and move deals through the entire cycle. So we have the capacity to do construction management, where we partner with local contractors to do the implementation. We bring financing options to the table, including PACE. We help with engineering and modeling if there's a need. We have capacity in-house to do auditing. And then we gather and help with the incentives and rebates. So it's a full cycle sort of model, recognizing that most building owners and most industrial operators don't have the time or energy or staff to really manage a large scale PACE project or an energy retrofit. And so we kind of come in and partner. We're a for-profit entity that helps to facilitate PACE. So that's good on that background. Next. So some of the things I'm going to talk about is just maybe a little bit of a reinforcement of what Dub has covered, but really helping people to understand the primary benefits of PACE and why it's different from conventional debt. Is important, especially if you're a service provider, if you're an HVAC person or electric lighting contracting company, or even a municipality who's trying to introduce this as an economic development tool. You really need to understand that this is not comparable to conventional financing. It does offer 100% financing, including soft costs. One of the primary benefits that we use when we talk with our prospective clients is that it really preserves owners' capital for other items. This is critically important as we look at the impact of COVID and the future impact of COVID 20, 21, 22, whatever we might run into, the whole new normal of uncertainty on cash flow and the need to preserve capital. That's a really important benefit. As within the Texas PACE, the energy savings are going to offset the cost of the financing. The other thing that's really important, that's a distinction between conventional debt and PACE, is that it's non-recourse to the borrower. If you use conventional debt, your company is on the hook and you're on the hook on a commercial side. And this is a really refreshing tool when you start talking to building owners, because there's very little, if any, other non-recourse debt that's out there. Technically, it's considered an off-balance financing. because it does go on the property tax as a special assessment. We see fixed rates in the nation up to 30 years. Dub mentioned that in the state of Texas, it is 25 years now. It's secured by the special assessment. And the other thing that's a really important benefit to understand is that the debt transfers with ownership. So at the point of sale, if you have secured a PACE assessment on your property, when you sell your property, the balance of that debt transfers with ownership. So it's not something that needs to be repaid at closing. And that's a significant benefit, especially if you have a building owner or an operator who's looking at maybe a 5-year hold strategy. And in 5 years, they're planning to sell. This gives them the capacity and capital to improve their asset and then walk away from it, basically. So those are the primary benefits that I'd like to emphasize. We can go to the next slide. So as we look at the industrial manufacturing industry, it is a challenge across the United States. We're a national company. We're doing deals in Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, Florida, Texas, New York, to name a few. And it's a standard issue across. Some of the barriers that we've recognized is that in this industry, there are aggressive ROI expectations. I've heard 1 to 2 years is pretty easy to get. 3 to 4, you must have some sort of exception to get there. And if it's more than 4, you're probably not going to get it approved through the conventional process. The other challenge that you have to be able to address as a barrier is most individuals that you'll talk to are used to conventional debt. And so they'll automatically in their mind start do conventional debt comparison, and they'll say, well, I can get interest rates, significantly below what the PACE is offering. But you have to really be able to understand and be able to explain why it's not the same as conventional debt. The other challenge in the industrial market specifically is there's often an annual allocation mindset. So when you're talking to decision makers and those that set the budget, they're thinking about how much money can I get allocated annually for my CapEx budget. And you're talking about a longer term investment with a longer term payback. And so you have to go into the conversation understanding that that's probably the mindset that they're used to, and you have to open up the mind a little. The other thing that we see is that they typically strategize their investments around productivity. And so they're going to look at end of useful life as an investment strategy. So they're looking at, this is a 20-year boiler and it's supposed to have a 30-year life. So we're not quite ready to replace it. Even though the energy savings could justify it, you have to know what the mindset is, end of useful life on those types of investments, because they're prioritizing production over capital improvements that are system related. The other big challenge I've kind of touched on is the lack of understanding of commercial PACE. It's a newer tool, and the only way the education happens is what you're seeing right now. And so as individual providers, we're out here trying to educate, but most people have not even heard of it yet. And so it's still an emerging tool. The other challenge we've found in industrial space is lack of staffing or expertise. They're not used to doing these large scale projects. Oftentimes they may have facility managers and they can manage the facility, but they're not really oriented towards large scale development projects. And therefore there's a gap that happens. I already mentioned the production prioritization. And then just getting the limited access to the decision maker. The challenge I have seen myself is that you can get facility people all day long to talk to you because they're challenged, they're struggling. They know the opportunities that exist, but getting in front of the real decision makers and helping them to understand the benefit is really the challenge when you're looking at industrial manufacturing. Specifically, it's true for every industry, but in this industry, I've found specifically getting the translation from facility manager to CEO or CFO is part of the barrier. Okay, next slide. So here's some strategies that we've used. We've done quite a few industrial facilities now. And these are some things that we use to overcome resistance to overcome those barriers that I mentioned on the prior screen. Number one, find a champion within the organization. Get somebody on the inside that you can educate and get them to understand and have them be your champion inside. If you don't have an inside connection, you're not going to get PACE across the finish line. Include a PACE industry expert. If you're a service provider or you're the head of a municipality, it's not to your benefit to be the expert on PACE. There's people like us out there, there's other providers out there who have been in the industry who can really explain it and dispel all the myths and help move the project forward. So if you can bring in a partner early, that's really helpful. The other thing in all sales is know your audience, but this is particularly important in the industrial manufacturing state for all the barrier reasons I discussed before. If you go in and you're presenting a 7-year payback, they're going to shut you down right away if you don't first address and say, I know you're looking for a 1 to 2 year payback, but here's why. So, know your audience. I recommend always do your homework, know the company and the industry before you go in or before you approach. There's tons of information out there available that helps to increase your credibility and open doors for you. The other thing that we like to do is just present a solution with the barriers in mind. Be upfront and address that elephant in the room. Say, I know that you're challenged by this 1 to 2 year payback that your policy has, but here's how you can overcome that. The next thing is, you really have to know your numbers and know theirs. If you're doing large scale projects, public companies, their information is out there. Know what they're struggling with. You can find it in their financials, but know your numbers too. Be able to articulate and understand and communicate the benefit of PACE to them from a financial standpoint. I've just found from an industry, there are very few companies, honestly, that are interested or concerned about the environmental as the primary driver. There are some, but the most companies that we deal with come to us because their HVAC system is on the fritz and it's 100 degrees and they need it fixed. The other last bullet point is if you're a service provider, this is specifically oriented to you, don't let the first, second, or third no scare you. Most of these deals have a very long development cycle, and you're going to have to really be diligent about going back because it's really a newer tool and they just don't understand the benefit. But it's getting the right person on the right day when they're having the right problem that you can open that door. All right, let's get into some of the case studies. So I'm going to review a few of these. Most of these are in Northwest Ohio because that's where we've been doing most of our business recently. This is a Coil steel fabrication, 150,000 square foot building. What we did for them was interior and exterior lighting, a new roof. Roofs are things that people don't often think about, but if you're creating an insulation factor, it's a huge cost for an industrial manufacturing facility, but it can create significant energy savings. We've replaced air rotation devices. We installed heated bay doors. We added R12 walls and foundation insulation. That foundation insulation and the walls was significant because they were expanding to add more capacity, and we were able to link it into the energy savings and drive that for them. Their total energy savings was $242,640. This one wasn't so much oriented around the energy savings, but it was a need to invest in the improvements of their building, and operationally be more effective and efficient. So let's go to the next one. Maumee Assembly and Stamping. So this was formerly a Ford stamping plant that was repurposed and is no longer Ford exclusive. This was one where we had great payback. So it was a $3.5 million project. We put a new R25 roof on it. That roof drove 35% energy savings. Interior and exterior lighting, replaced the rooftop HVAC systems. We decommissioned a boiler system. We did a power factor correction, and that power factor correction saved them almost enough money that covered their annual assessment on a $3.5 million project. There were significant rebates. Their annual savings came out to be about 33%, and that created a payback of 3.77 years. This was a really nice project, and it was one that now has gone on to a second phase where they've installed a solar array on the roof because they understood the value and decided to make an additional investment. Okay, let's go to the next one. So ICE Industries, this is a deep draw stamping plant in Toledo, Ohio. Interior and exterior lighting. Again, most industrials have already done their low-hanging fruit, which is the lighting. But we try to propose lighting with a comprehensive project because then the lighting savings can help offset the savings deficit that you might get on a roof or what you might get for an HVAC system. We did roof replacement repairs. We did man door and overhead door replacement. This was a smaller project, $246,000. They had $81,000 in credits and rebates that they could qualify for. Their annual savings was $31,000. The combined simple payback was 4.3 years on a $250,000 project. Okay, let's go next. Michigan Bread Company. So this was an interesting project, 62,000 square foot manufacturing warehousing facility. They do custom breads for restaurants primarily. We did a roof mounted solar array, LED lighting. We also replaced and updated their skylights. This was really interesting because we had to be really specific about the lighting install because it had to be food grade. And so there were a lot of parameters that we had to put in place to help them do this project. $1 million project, credits and rebates, $335,000, gave them an 8.9 year payback. Was a great alternative to taking on additional conventional debt, and it really improved the environment and the work conditions for the employees. Okay, next. Global Distribution Center. So this is a large scale, 3-building, 800,000 square foot warehousing facility. We did LED lighting upgrades, and we did a lot of replacement of exterior service doors and man doors, replaced the overhead doors. This was a situation where it had multiple tenants and most of it was freight shipping in and out. So the replacement of those doors was huge from a cost saving standpoint. It's a $660,000 project, $10,000 in rebates. Their annual savings was about $47,000 a year in utility costs. He really liked this because it put the debt on the property tax, and he had triple net leases, which means his tenants were then repaying the debt, their prorated portion of the debt. So he made this investment and passed the debt onto the tenants, and they didn't mind because their utility costs went down. So it was a neutral impact on them from a financial standpoint. But for him as the building owner, he got his buildings upgraded, the tenants are happy, and they're paying his improvements. So that was a win-win-win on a project on a large scale. Next. Okay, that's all mine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Teresa. Great examples. So now we're going to kind of wrap up here in the next few minutes with resources. And I did see some questions come in, and we'll address those before we wrap up today. So in summary, we view, you've heard of win-win-win. We think it's actually win-win-win-win-win because property owners can benefit through it in a number of different ways. For contractors, this is an opportunity. If you've ever scoped and proposed a project that has a high price tag and the owner cringes, this can be a way across that capital hurdle. With a lender, if you are not now in the business of making PACE loans, this may make a lot of sense to you. It's a low risk, very, very stable, fully collateralized loan product. From a public perspective, and the reason really that the public purpose behind PACE in the first place, reducing peak demand, stress on the electric grid benefits everyone, enhances reliability. We're also indirectly improving air quality. About 80% of the electric generation in the state of Texas is fuel-based, meaning that you've got emissions as a result of combustion of fuel. So we're having an impact, a positive impact on outdoor air quality. Water resource conservation, that in Texas this week, that certainly is not a challenge, but we've been through drought periods before when it is. And we can make more electricity, but we can't make more water. So we need to be concerned about how we're using it. And then economic development and jobs for communities is also repurposing and taking building shells, maybe an eyesore, and putting those back into service. Some of the key takeaways, financial, Teresa and I both talked about some of these. Not a balance sheet liability, doesn't tie up your credit, line of credit, increases the plant value, environmental performance, can be transferred if the property conveys, it's tied to the land, can be paid off too, but by design it conveys from owner to owner. And then again, the key to it, paid off over a very long period of time compared to say 5 years for a typical equipment loan, and a cash flow positive day one. From the programmatic side, if you're unfamiliar with PACE, which most people are in that category, there's a lot of resources to help you. We can do that. Contractors can help you do that. I think communities across the state increasingly are adding PACE to their portfolio of options, tools in the toolkit to help property owners in their jurisdictions make these improvements. And if you're a contractor or a lender, this can open the door, and this can be the financing tool you need to help get projects across the finish line that otherwise might be cost prohibitive. So some of the resources here are all of this is on our website, texasspaceauthority.com, our program guide, technical standards, any events and training that are upcoming. And then we will have a sort of a self-paced online contractor training that'll be available soon, where you can go through that and receive a certification or a training certificate at the end of that. We have case studies, the one I mentioned plus others, and then overall the industrial overview is there too on how PACE can be used in the industrial sector. So with that, we are almost at time, and I don't want to keep folks, but I do see some questions that have come up. So I'm going to get to those, but also I will leave up, make sure you have my email address and you have Teresa's as well. If you have questions after this, please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us. We're happy to respond to emails, or Teresa's got her phone number there as well, but want to make sure that, if you've got questions, that we can answer them. So let me go through a few of the questions that have come in. First one, are there other states aside from Texas that authorize use of PACE for manufacturing and industrial projects? Yes, clearly the examples that Teresa highlighted in Ohio. Where else did you say? In Minnesota?
Yeah.
So different states. I think it's probably more common for a state to offer PACE for C&I, for commercial and industrial, than it is for residential. I think 3 or 4 states have residential, but the balance of them, when we talk about C-PACE, C actually includes industrial also, but it's just it's called C-PACE. So industrial properties certainly qualify, I think, in pretty much every state C-PACE program.
And Doug, if I can just add, I don't know that there's any legislation that excludes industrial manufacturing. I think what has precluded it from being done is that it's just really hard to get into that market because of the barriers that we talked about. So it's not so much that it's not a tool that's available, it's just a market that has not taken advantage of it. It's sort of the low-hanging fruit. You do the easy deals first. Hospitality was real easy when we started out. But the industrial manufacturing is on everybody's radar for the reasons that you highlighted from a demand use standpoint.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Good point. Next question, and I should have said this at the outset, but I didn't. I apologize. But will the presentation be available for the audience? Yes. We will actually have not only the presentation, but a recording of the webinar on our YouTube channel. And if you registered and you're attending today, we have your email. And so you will be emailed a follow-up with those links. So yes, it will be available. Next question, are there opportunities to use PACE for projects that improve water quality, reduce use of chemicals that may affect wastewater, streams, et cetera? Possibly, if there is a water savings or energy savings benefit that the project can map to, that may be what qualifies it. And then if there is an associated cost reduction from reduced use of chemicals, that may answer the cash flow or the SIR question. So possibly, but I think we need to make sure that there is a energy or water savings benefit as part of the project.
Yeah, and I think I would just add that the way that you could probably integrate that is if you do a comprehensive project, that a component of it is the water quality, because the SIR issue is going to negate, there's not going to be the savings that you're looking for, but you could blend it with a larger scale project. But as a standalone, I think it would be really tough to get the commercial financing behind it.
Okay, good. Another comment, what about the SIR being equal to or greater than what the SIR is below 1? Can it qualify? Yes. And could the PACE assessment be reduced to achieve the SIR? that's really sort of a balancing act between components of the project that have costs and then the savings that they produce. And sometimes, you may step back, do a comprehensive assessment, scope a perfect project, but then it may be that certain things don't fit within the PACE financing model. It's not exactly value engineering, but it's sort of moving, it's like a chessboard, moving things in and out so that the PACE project financially meets the qualifications. That may mean that there's a few things that still are worth doing, but those will be funded with other sources of capital. And again, I think, as Teresa just mentioned, there's clear benefit in a comprehensive project where some things may spin off additional savings to leverage needs that can be accomplished all at one time. And then last question I see here, let's see, an example could include conversion to a powder paint coating system to reduce paint and solvent water and wastewater streams. Could that type of project qualify? I think so. We have not seen one in Texas, but I think that certainly could, if you are using a different strategy, different approach, different technology, regardless of what it is. If it yields water, wastewater, and related utility cost savings, that's probably something that's generally going to be inbounds and is going to qualify. We'd have to meet the financial, the SAR, and so forth as well. But I think technically a project like that would qualify. Teresa, have you seen anything like that in any of the auto manufacturing or painting or treating facilities?
No, not specifically to that, but I think the delineation here is that maybe this will help is that while we're environmentally conscious, this is not specifically an environmental protection agency sort of look. So it's not so much about in totality the pollution of the water. Well, that's a critical issue. This tool is really oriented towards the energy savings and the protection of the environment through the reduction of the carbon footprint and so forth. So some of these questions and the idea of, yeah, it's going to improve the environment, it's going to improve the water quality. If it doesn't decrease the demand on those resources, then it's probably going to be tough to qualify from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, those are the questions I've got. And again, you've got our email there, both Teresa's and mine. We're sort of at time, a few minutes over. Thanks for sticking with us, and look for a follow-up email with links to the recording. I think there's going to be a brief survey there as well. And if you would like a certificate for an hour of professional development hours for this webinar, email that request to me. I'm happy to get you that. And then also if you're interested, after completing this webinar and this training today, we can have you listed on our service provider directory if you'd like to be listed there. So with that, we'll wrap up, and thank you, and look for additional training events and webinars and so forth on our website under the training and education section. Have a good rest of your day, and thanks for spending an hour with us this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.